Hello, thank you for joining us today. We're excited to share today's workshop with you about using NITRO to manage purchasing. This is a really interesting topic to me, so I'm really excited to have all this information and share it with you today. My name is Krista White, and I'm joined today by James Restivo, our VP of Product Development. And we are going to go ahead and dive in. I'm not going to chit chat too much in the beginning here, but just a couple housekeeping things as we get started. This will be recorded and we will post it to our YouTube channel and also to our website. So if you want to check the replay, we will also be sending this out to you if you've registered. So don't worry about taking notes. You can just kind of sit back and enjoy the workshop. And we would also love to get your questions. We don't want to just talk at you for the next, 30, 40 minutes. We do want to get your questions and hear your feedback, anything that you've got there. So go ahead and use that question box on the right-hand side and go to webinar. And now with that being said, I want to go ahead and hand things over to our amazing VP of Product Development, James Restivo.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Yeah, today we're going to take a little walkthrough of our purchase request system, and essentially what I'm going to do is I think I explained it to Chris if this made sense, and she said it did, so thankfully it does. NITRO-based kind of walkthrough of what our out-of-the-box purchasing does. So you can, if you're using a NITRO Studio as like general, like within a site or within your whole tenant or a farm, you can apply similar concepts. Now, what I'm showing you is a fully built out system, but certainly you can apply some of those concepts that we're going to show today on your own, in your own use of NITRO. And so I'll focus on like the core elements, the core things that you're going to want to develop and put in place. And some of these things could be developed over time. There's an iterative kind of process I find with some of our internal processes. We do a lot of iterative updates of, well, we need to add this field to the form. Now we have to add this notification, or we need to make sure this person gets notified, or we need to create this task. And, it just becomes an iterative kind of process, which is great because it kind of organically builds out into a system that works well. So you can start simple, start small, and then kind of grow from there. But I want to give you sort of the core elements of what you'd want to consider in not only just like NITRO purchasing, but also any kind of application you might be building with NITRO. So I'm gonna go ahead and make myself the presenter so I can share my screen here. And all right, that should be showing now. So again, this is our purchase request solution. So when we talk about building applications and doing things with NITRO or with any of the tool sets that are out there in general, you have really three main pillars or three main elements that you want to take a look at when you're looking at these applications. There's the intake form and perhaps who should have access to that intake form. There's the workflow behind it, what has to happen once that form gets submitted, once it gets sent through the system. Who needs to get notified? Are there any other tasks that need to get created based on that? What criteria might create tasks? Things like that. So essentially, the workflow processing side of things comes into play, and then you're going to have the reporting, the UI-ish sort of thing, but reporting, and then look and feel. In general, UI I think is important too, but kind of start with the functionality and then add the look and feel around it. What do you, and then from a reporting perspective, what do you need to see? What metrics do you need to pull out of the system? What do you need to report on to show your superiors, to your company, to your team, what's happening, and what sort of information is going to give you the details of what you want to look for as far as process improvement or improving communications and things like that. But you kind of want to start from the form, like what's the intake, what's that going to look like, and then we'll tag into these other things as we go through the solution. So again, like I said, we're using our out-of-the-box purchase request solution as a framework. It's got probably a few more bells and whistles in there than you would be able to put in place yourself, or at least not right away. But we'll kind of start here. And what you want to have at the beginning is a way to intake your information about the purchase request. So you want to understand who's submitting the request. Is it for a particular department? Maybe you want to see if it's budgeted. Maybe you want to see if it is, what the amount is. Of course, you're going to want to see what the amount is and what's actually being purchased. So we'll walk through that purchase request form. I'm going to tag over to the NITRO Forms system over here, NITRO Forms designer, for this purchase request list. Now you can start with a blank list and just add fields on as you go. Of course, NITRO, as you might know, has an easy way to add columns through the create column option. So you can add additional fields as you go along here. So you can really just start from a blank list and start adding your fields. But the core things you want to capture, and certainly you can always add more or capture fewer things, but the core things you really want to get are, you want to track status. So you're going to want to put a status field on your form as far as what is, tracking it through the process. That's going to be useful for your state management as you're going through the workflow piece of it. What stage of approval is it in? That's going to be important. You might want to put priority. You might want to put purchase request number, though you could use the regular SharePoint ID number for that. That's fine. Type of purchase, this is something we put in here for our tool, but may or may not need it. And department's going to be important because you want to understand where's the purchase coming from, where who's submitting. Is this person allowed to submit a purchase request for that department? Because you probably don't want your finance team submitting a request for your HR team or vice versa, or maybe maybe they could on behalf of, but you might probably want to put a department field in there. Then you're going to want to know who's submitting the request. And that could be just simply the person who's creating the request. So you could just put in use our control over here, which is the autofill user information. What that's going to do is allow you to see who is filling out this form, automatically populate that field with the person who is filling out that form, and then you'll have that information recorded. You also have that information recorded in the created information, so you do have it in a couple different places. But you're going to want to know who created the form, and that's going to help determine, perhaps determine where that goes through for approval, because maybe it's not based on department, but it could be based on user. You probably want to put a reason for the purchase in there, like why are we buying this? What's the justification for it? And that can be coming from a number of different things. Whoever is approving this is going to want to see, why am I approving this? Why is this required? Even if that's not the case, I think it's best practice to always have some kind of reason for purchase in there, just because that you can always go back like 2 years later. Why do we buy 5 Dell laptops? Oh, because they had a deal and we felt like we needed them at the time, and now they're just sitting there. But at least there's some justification, whether it's relevant today or not. At least there's some justification for, at the time that this was submitted, this is the reason we thought we should purchase these things. So it gives you that auditability to kind of go back and see why was this put through. So then, other than the fields on the form, you're going to want to, you're probably going to get total cost, but we can update that through automation. Purchase quantity, some of that can be updated through automation. Really, the line items is I think a great way to manage that purchasing, because it does give you that repeating row kind of aspect, that where you can have multiple line items on one purchase request. Because rarely you're going to be going through and submitting a purchase request for one item, even from the same vendor. Some of the quotes that come across from customers who bought from us, there's the license cost, but then might be professional services and training on top of that, and each one of those ends up being its own line item. So you could do the same thing here with your purchase solution, is create these different line items and have this field here. And this is done through our NITRO associated items field. And we have a separate list of line items that's connected to this one. And the way we have that working is we have a purchase items list over here. On this list, we have some information about what is being purchased, maybe some details about the pricing, the amount, maybe model number, some information. I'll pop open the NITRO form so we can take a look at it actually. But the key you know, I always like to really highlight the key connection in that associated items field is going to be the purchase request lookup. So on your purchase items list, you're going to want to have a lookup to the purchase request list so that you can see it in the context of the form directly. So it's going to know which purchase items to show here because it's connected through that lookup ID. These items are related to this purchase request, so it's going to show those items here. So that's the key connection. If you look at the settings for this associated items list, you'll see you have that relationship right here. You could do it other ways through text or query builder, but your purchase request lookup is really what's going to be key for indicating which purchase line items are relevant for this purchase request. Of course, you can certainly just add them as you go. And when you add them along, you're going to, I'm just going to do this through the NITRO form so you can see what it looks like. You're going to add a few different things. Now, in our tool, we've built in the concept of having a catalog where you have a category of items that you would select from. So that's a list that you might want to put in there. Here are the different categories of items that people can purchase. You associate those categories with particular items in the catalog. So that could be a way to cascade and drive your selections if you have a few things you need to purchase, or, you know, it's really useful for those kind of like scenarios where you're not purchasing a heck of a lot of things. If you're purchasing a lot of stuff, it might be hard to maintain a catalog like that unless you have some sort of external connection to the SharePoint list, or even using our external database column. If you maintain things in SQL or some other database, you could potentially maintain that connection and maybe make it a little easier than maintaining it in a SharePoint list. But you have that option to maintain categories, which will then filter your options for your items through a catalog kind of scenario. We could add in more fields here as far as, I think we even like show maybe an image field or maybe a few other things that you could show here to show what that item looks like. But you could also get more details. What it's going to do ultimately is pre-populate some information on here. So when we have that catalog, we know who we're buying it from for the most part. But we also definitely know what's the price, because that's going to be stored in the catalog. Quantity, of course, could be something that's updated manually by the person submitting this. And then the price could also be variable, so that could be input directly manually as well. So if you're not pulling it from the catalog type scenario, you can have your users directly enter, here's the item I'm purchasing, what's called. They give it a description, it could be whatever they want it to be, and then they could associate a vendor with it, and then manually enter the price per unit, manually enter the quantity. That's going to automatically calculate as, that can automatically calculate as you go. And I'll show you how that automatic calculation happens. Well, first of all, with price per unit and quantity, we're going to do I think we have a calculated column on here. Let me actually double check, see where, because I know we have a way to show the total amounts. It might not be on this form. Yeah, total cost for items. So I'm just going to pull that into the field briefly. You can see this is actually a calculated column. And you're going to want to take that calculated column and you have a calculation in here, quantity times price per unit. So price per unit, so that's the field right here. You can pull it from your list over here. Quantity, of course, is another field from here. So you got those two fields that you can, really just a simple multiplication. How many am I buying? How much does it cost? And put in there. So that's going to be your calculated column. We're not showing it on the form because you don't want anyone to edit it or update it. It's going to be automatically. So it is there, but that's kind of a hidden field you might want to have on your line items to drive the process. So I would recommend that if you're going through it, when you have multiple line items, you have a place to take a number to add it all up together. So once they've gone through and added the information they need to add for the line item, they can come back, they'll be added to their form. There'll be a total cost field here. And we're handling that total cost through what we call an aggregate column. So if we look at the purchase request line items column again, Oh, interesting. Okay, I got some kind of error, unexpected. Love to get those unexpected errors during demos. They're the best. No, so you got aggregates section over here that will allow you to determine which fields from, or which field or fields from the line items you want to aggregate. So it's really, it gives you a kind of a on-the-fly calculation within the context of the form. And so that'll increment as you add items into the line items list. So that aggregate will go up, whatever that turns out to be, as far as the number. And then now you can use that aggregate or total cost. We actually have another total cost field, which I think we're just probably using a form event action to pull into to the total cost. Let me just take a look at that. No, okay. Probably using potentially workflow or custom action. But essentially we're taking that total cost aggregate and kind of doing the same thing that it's doing within the context of this field, just taking that number and putting it over here into the total cost. And that's going to potentially drive your approval process. So you want to take that aggregate, you want to take that summation of those numbers, use a form of an action or some, maybe when it gets submitted, you update that total cost field. However you do it, because you can do it a couple different ways. I think we built this before we really had form event action, so I think I like the form event action because what you can do in that is kind of show you one possibility here is to let's see, calculate total cost. So we can execute it on column value change. And because these line items, that's actually a field column, we can choose it from our list here. So we can say anytime that field changes, we can update our total cost. So that means anytime you add a new line item or anytime you remove a line item, you can update that total cost field. And what we're going to do is, first we're going to do fetch items, get line items, and we're going to do a collection. So items gives you multiple items. We're going to query our purchase items list. That's the one where we have the lookup. And we're going to use related items here. Okay, so it's going to look at the related items, purchase requests, just a list view to filter things. All items is fine. It's by default going to know, because of the lookup column, it's just the line items related to this purchase request. And we do have a 50 item limit. So if you're, but I can't imagine. I guess there could be some cases where you're purchasing more than 50 items, but if you are, might have to have some kind of workaround. Then we can address that if you have a question about that. But so 50 item limit. So essentially what this is doing is getting those line items, sort of fetching that list, and then we're going to update form controls, and we're going to update total cost. And let's see if I remember how to do all that. Can I do it on the fly here? Yeah, we can update total cost, and we get this from, let's see, add a placeholder. Yeah, we can add this. I think it's query list action name. Let's see, count. Yeah, query list action name sum. So we can do query list action name # sum. And I need to check because it looks like it's going to work without that question mark on there, or the $sign on there. So that's fine. That looks good. So then sum, and then we're going to see what's the value there. Value placeholder. Oh, we just have the value placeholder. So we just put whatever total was our list. What was it called? So now we can go back here and find out what it was. So fortunately, we've added this feature here where we get the internal name. So we can just copy that internal name and put it into here. And then you can do the display name too. Actually, I think it's internal display. Actually, let's do it this way. So you do the internal, external name, display name, and then typing internal name. Anyway, long story short, we're going to get a, let's see, I forgot a close bracket there. Okay, long story short, we're going to get the sum of those line items and put that into this total cost field. So we're getting those total costs for items, summing it up across all those line items and putting it in there. So that gives you a way to use that form event action to get the information on the fly. As you add items as you go, you're going to be able to get that update and put it in there. So now you can use that information further on in your processing. So I'm just going to leave that for now in case we need to come back to it. And yeah, anyway. Okay, great. So now you've got your, you've got your information about what's being submitted. You've got your line items. You've got the total cost. Now you're going to want to figure out what's your approval process. And this is where things get really, really variable. Like now they've submitted it or they've filled it out. Maybe you want to give them an option for a draft mode. That's possible. You could have them save it instead of just directly submitting it for approval. So what we've done to handle that scenario is create a save button, and we also have a submit for approval button. So you could change it to say save as draft. You can add a new save action in there. So if you add a new submit action, we could call it save as draft. And I have to do a dummy text here. Just bear with me a moment. Call back. All right. So you put some dummy script in there then you can apply it, and then you can change the icon, to whatever you want. Let's do that. For that. And then we can hide the save button. So all stuff you can do through NITRO Forms pretty easily. We could do it through here, and so now you have two different save buttons. It makes it a little more clear. You're going to save as draft versus a submit for approval. You'll see on the submit for approval, we have a whole approval process here, and this is where you'd want to think about and really map out what's your approval process look like, both on who's it going to through, what are the criteria for determining who those approvers are, how many levels do you have, and how do we go to each level. So what we've built in our system, it's pretty complicated. I'll maybe go through in a high level today, but I've done a workshop on this using custom actions and workflows for approval. I think I did one a couple of years ago. They're out there. There's a video about how to do it. And what we're doing through our out-of-the-box tool is creating an approval levels list, so you can dynamically, every customer can choose a different set of approvers, a different set of criteria for going through the approval process, whether it's type of purchase or department or requester, and of course value is part of that as well, part of that calculation as well. But in your scenario, if you're developing it specifically for your organization, you may want to do something a little more what we would call hard-coded. Maybe it's not as flexible, but it does meet the needs of exactly what you need, because that's what your process requires. Like it's going to the manager, the employee's manager, then it's going to the IT director or the finance manager, whomever the next level is. You might have that defined process for your purchases already in place. So it's a little hard to know exactly which way you're going to want to go with that, but kind of in general, you want to manage your tasks, approver tasks, through a task list. So what we have in our tool is and what I recommend for your build out of a tool like this is not to track the approvals on the purchase request form directly, because that can get messy, that could get tricky, and you have to start sending things back. You have to make a lot of updates to the field and make a lot of different changes. I would recommend having an approver task list, which over here has a lookup to the item, and because it's a task list, which I know modern SharePoint's not too happy with these task lists. It is task lists, so it does still allow you to create task lists in modern SharePoint. But yeah, I would recommend having a task list like this, so you can track those approvals and go through the different levels as you do it. And so you can have something, some kind of scenario where you're, submit for approval. I would recommend on this form is going to be a custom action that creates the task in the approver list. Now you'll see there's probably a lot more complication in here than you necessarily need in your scenario, but just to kind of give you a sense of what we're going through here. You have the submit for approval. It's querying the approval levels, I think, and then determining what those are. But you may just want to simply create a task. So you could just have a very simple add list item action. Hit the wrong one, excuse me. And we're going to add task to approver tasks list. So you can put some conditions around that, and then you can create your tasks in the approver task list. And then now you define what those fields are that you fill out, who the approver is. When I say hard code, you can have it hard coded in here in the sense that it's always going to be assigned to, and I'm going to say fixed value. Let me say Krista. Krista, you're always going to approve these, so I'll put you in there. So always assigned to Krista White, and then so that's like what we would call hard coded. But if you want to do something a little more flexible, you can do something a little closer to what we're doing, where you can look at the approval levels, and we're getting this query over here where we're looking at the purchase items number one, and then we actually are invoking this workflow, which now the workflow is one that's picking up the approver task. So it's a little, you can see it's a little complicated here. We got to go through and see this, but the complexity of this part of it is really variable, and again, in your specific scenarios. So let's look at that approval process for normal flow, just to kind of see what we're doing over here. And so we're kicking it off, we're invoking this from a custom action, submit for approval. We're checking the approval status, we're getting that approval level. So this is where we can make it a little more dynamic, is that we're using this query list to say, go get that approval level list from, here's that approval levels list. And we're matching up, and this was actually not too bad. You might want to think about something like this for your scenario, where all we're really doing is saying, the department has to match, type of purchase has to match, amount has to match, and level has to match, meaning level 1, level 2, level 3, which is what we have that's actually on the approval levels list. And then we can fire off the rest of this process. So we're getting that approval level from that list. And I'll show you what that looks like if we come over here. And you see how our approval levels list. Got some information, type of purchase, amount, who the approver should be, what departments are applicable, what level they'd be at, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how long does it take for it to come due. So we've actually got a lot of really nice features in here for this approval level dynamic process, where you could drive these different tasks that get created. So that could be something you consider for your scenario where you keep it a little more flexible. And then again, you could match it up to whatever fields you think are appropriate on your list. So type of purchase is coming from approval levels, and then you're going to be mapping over to the type of purchase on the purchase request list. Same with amount, mapping over to total cost from the amount that's it's on here, amount. So you can see you can map those together. You can create this conditional to say, okay, when the approval level matches all these things, now we're going to create that approver task. And there's no other things we're doing here because it's going through, and this workflow is being invoked at every level in the process. So it does make it a little more complicated because there's a few more things we need to do. But in a more simple scenario, you could just say, get the approval level, assign it to that person. Now, when they approve it on the approver task list, now we're coming over to that approver task list, and let me get that one. Oh, here it is. And we have our own custom actions there on the approver task list. Now on the approver task list, you can approve, deny, or send back. So now you've got this process where, okay, we've created the task. Now what? Okay, so it goes to the person. Through the NITRO Forms and through some of the settings on the NITRO Forms, we've locked down who can actually mark the item as approved. So if you look at approve custom action, not only through the forms, but also through the through this tool, we're looking at when a logged in user matches assigned to, that then we're allowing this custom action to be run. So what this means from a practicality standpoint is that no one else can come in and approve this task. Only the person who's assigned to this task can approve it. So we've locked that down and said, you know, only that person can approve it, and they can only approve it if the approval decision is not yet made. And then we're going to open up the approver form. I'm going to ignore the scripting because I don't want to show that. You guys shouldn't have to do scripting in your scenarios. Again, if it's a little more hard coded, you don't necessarily need that flexibility. But you know, you approve the form, you have a place to intake the approver comments, and then that's added back to the purchase request. So throughout the process, what you've got is the approver task gets created, the approver can make one of these decisions, and then when it gets approved, you can now go and invoke that workflow to check to see if there's another level, or if you're hard coding it, you can do a little more and say, you can say like approve level 1 and approve level 2. It's kind of like, you know, I don't want to say, you know, I guess brute force it a little bit in that sense. So you have approve level 1 and then approve level 2 on the approver task list. So approve level 1 would only be applicable if it's the first approver task. Approve level 2 would only work if it's a second level task. You know, things like that you can put in place to make it, you know, work for your specifics needs. So you get the approver level 1, approver level 2, whatever, approver level 3. You know, it can have any number of levels in there to make it work. And then once it gets, you know, once all that gets done, once all the approval levels are completed, you would mark the update that status. I remember I mentioned that status field. You can have that update throughout as far as approval level 1, you know, approved at level 1, pending level 2, whatever status you want to put in there. You can indicate that it is not quite there yet. It's not quite approved yet. And then once you've got that final level of approval, now you can confidently say, okay, this purchase request, it's approved, and it goes into approved list. And then of course there's notifications that go out around this. So you can use the send mail action. Once the purchase request is approved, you might even have one on here already created, but let me just see what we have out of the box. Let's see, on purchase requests, we have send mail, box, adaptive card. So might not have it on the purchase request itself, but you could easily add a notification workflow to when an item is modified on the purchase request list. And you could do your conditions would be status equals after change approved. So what we're saying is that after we're looking for this status field to change, and if it changes to approved, then we trigger this workflow. If it does not change or does not change to approved, this workflow does not get configured. So that's what that means. And then on the workflow itself, we can say send mail and just simply send an email to the person submitting the form. Notify when approved. So you can see there's we already have one in there, mail template request or request approved. So it's probably happening in one of our other workflows. But if you're building this out yourself, you can have that, create that mail template. Obviously it's going to go to the requester. So you want that to go to users in column, that one. And that'll be submitted for, or purchase agent, probably submitted for. Whatever field you use for that, capturing the person who's submitting the form, really whoever needs to be notified that this item, this purchase request is now approved. You can put that in there. And then a from address, you just want to put maybe a generic one or just whatever, purchasing. It does not have to be a real address. Just put whatever you need to. And that will then notify the person when it's approved. So after that status gets changed to approved, it'll send out this notification. Very simple, very straightforward. You can also do some other things, update other fields, send out other notifications. If you're using our bot, you could post an adaptive card and send it through the bot. Say, hey, purchase request X was approved, and you're also notifying the people here, right? So you can notify the you know, requester. The recipient would be you know, again, submitted for. So you can have that notification go out through the bot as well. We can fill out those other fields to show what actually gets filled out. So you can do that, send an email, send a Teams notification, or you can you can post in a Teams channel. So a number of things you could do. If essentially, once that gets approved, you can decide what you want it to do. So you got all that flexibility to make that happen. So then once you've kind of nailed down your workflow, which I'll be honest, it's probably going to be the longest period of development of something like this, is to understand what's that workflow, what's that approval process, how is that going to work. That's probably where you're going to be doing most of your testing. The form itself is pretty straightforward. You can just pop your fields on there, say what you want them to be. The line items piece is pretty straightforward. The workflow piece, again, is going to be the most variable. It's going to be the most specific or unique to your scenario. But you can use some tips and tricks from this from what you've seen today to help drive that process. But ultimately, once you've done all that, once you've defined that process, once you've got it working, got it tested, now what do you want your users to see or your administrators to see? And that's where we have these other NITRO elements coming into play to show the dashboard, to show tiles across the top, to show reports. So that's where you can start configuring these tiles, configuring these reports, and put them onto pages. And to modify any of this stuff, we're using branding in our tool, so you normally wouldn't have to do this if you're just using a standard SharePoint site. I have to add a little text into the URL to get it to show. Now you can come in here, edit a page, and add these elements to it, right? So if you have your tiles and dials, you can see, add a link tiles web part just to show you what that looks like. If you just do it from scratch, we do link tiles. So it's going to pull up the link tiles from Crow Canyon, add that. Then we come over here, hit the edit web part, and now it's going to go look at what groupings you already have pre-configured. And if you don't have any pre-configured, you can hit the link here to create a new link, new grouping. So you do a new link tiles group. I won't go through all that, setting it up. I'll just show you what it looks like on the existing one. We can say I have different tiles groups that I can show on different pages. And you create the different tiles. So we got the pending PO generation, pending approval, that all matches here, pending PO generation, pending approval, et cetera, et cetera. You can control the colors, you can control the swiping that you can see, the black box that's coming across. You can control if that's coming from the left or the right or the top, the bottom, center, or not at all. And that's on that can be done, that's on a global basis, but each tile, have your settings here for your link tile, what's it linking over to, who can see it. This is another piece of it that I like about the link tiles, is that you can control who sees what. So if you wanted to only show a tile for a certain group, you could do that. You could specify that group, and it'll look at the SharePoint group. I believe you can use SharePoint. It's going to work for SharePoint groups. I think if you have the AD connection enabled, you can use it for AD groups as well. Header text is going to be what appears on the tile, and then you got some color scheme around it, so you can play with those colors and make them look, different. And then the body is going to be, what are we showing in that body? Well, what we're showing here is a count of items in a particular view, right? So if you want to count the number of pending items that are approved but pending PO generation, we have a list view. So we got to start with a list view. And we have a list view that has that filter on it, and it's going to show me how many items are in that list view. So if you look over here, you see we're using a list view. It's all approved. That's our list view, and it's counting the number of items in there. So when you're building these, it's kind of important to start with, okay, what views do we want to show? What counts do we want to get out of the system? Create those views, and then you can then add your tiles. But also if you create one and you're like, oh, I don't have a view for that particular tile that I want, no problem, save it, go create that view, come back into this, create that tile, and then if it's a link tile, you're going to want to create a link to that view as well. So you want to get the URL. You can see there's a long URL here for that view, so that's going to help as well. So that's one thing you do with the tiles. You can build them out, play around with those colors, play around with the scheme, play around with how they look. I think I showed this in a recent webinar where you could change the the radius of the tiles. Not actually going to save this because this is a demo site, but you can see it gives a little rounding to the corners. I think it's a pretty cool feature. We can make it look a little more modern, I suppose. You can even do circles if you want, which can look a little funky depending on the situation. These look a little funky, but that's going to be dependent on the size of the screen. So I got a bigger screen here, so it's going to show more across the way. So things like that. So you can play around with that. But then there's other elements here as well. So I want to spend all the time on link tiles, but there's also also reports that you can build out as far as purchase requests by status, requests by department. And so again, same idea. You can come in, add the web part. I'll add a new one just to show you what that looks like. It's right here, but if you don't see it at the top, you can always just type in report. There's these different types of reports. It's going to be this one, report Crow Canyon. So it's going to be a little different than Report Center. That's a whole web part in itself, but report, you probably want to put that on its own page. But report Crow Canyon. Then same idea, you got to edit the web part, choose which report you want to add on there. And if you don't see it, you can go and create that report and then add it on there. So you can also play around with the header text or hide the header. So there's different things you can do there to make it look, change around the look and feel. So that's the reporting piece. The other thing you can also have like the list view web part. It's another one that kind of shows you some metrics. Again, if you don't see it right at the top, you can just type in list view for the search, add a list view web part, edit that, create a list view. Now, the nice thing about list view web parts, I like the few advantages it has over the SharePoint list views. One is that you can build a query on the fly. It's a lot, or not on the fly, but you can build a query that's a lot more complicated than what you can get with the SharePoint queries. So if you ever get frustrated with getting a view in SharePoint and the filters don't quite work right, or you have and or conditions and you have a fairly, you basically want to take like multiple fields, have, field A equals X, field B equals Y, field C equals Z. You can't really, or is less than or greater than, or if field D is, less than AA, you can get pretty complicated with the queries. So it gives you a way to kind of use our condition builder to build different queries for your list views. So you can get a lot of information like, hey, show me purchase requests where the let's see, what list are we on here? This is looking at the task list. Let me get the purchase request list here. All right, let's create a new view here. Query, and show me where purchase requests status is not equal to approved. You can use this little ellipsis here to get the actual, make sure you don't mistype something or add a space where you shouldn't. Status is approved, and we create we'll add a group, and we'll do an or condition here. So you can say where status is not equal to approved, and the department equals, say, finance, I think is one of them, or department equals IT. So now try again a filter like that in SharePoint list views. It's kind of difficult. And then I even add another condition here. So it's like, okay, now we've built out like, and this, one of these two conditions has to be met, and it's got to be, over, total costs. Was it total cost for line items? Total cost is greater than $1,000. So you can create a query list view. It takes all this stuff into account. Again, try doing this with SharePoint list views. You might be able to do this one, but it's a little tricky, a little complicated. But you can make it even more complicated, where you can even nest groups even further down through here. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in building out that query for your list views. Yeah, so there's a lot there in that list view web part. You can, now you have to identify which columns you want to have on there, and you gotta be a little tricky it's a little tricky here in the sense that whatever order you select the columns in here is the order that they will appear in that view, and it's really difficult to change them. I'm sure we'll be rolling out an update down the line to mitigate that, but for now, if you're using this web part, just be aware if you select a field in here, it's going to always be the first one, and then if I select a couple more, I can't really go and change them. Okay, so I can't go and change the order. I have to delete them out. So you just want to be careful and think about what order you want your fields to be in on that view before you go and save it, because it could be tricky. And of course, as they all well know, I could probably go into each one of these web parts in detail for a long time, but just kind of give you the gist of what you can do with the reporting or UI side of things, with the dashboarding side of things. You can manage those different elements. Let's make sure I moved all the extra web parts. I think I did. All right, go ahead, republish. Yeah, that's kind of the high level. Here's what you can do to get a purchase request solution in place using NITRO. Just to quickly recap, you got the form intake area. You got where you have to input your different fields. Make sure you capture what the fields you want to capture. Think about all that. I highly recommend doing the purchase line items methodologies. That way you can have as many line items as you need. It could be anywhere from 1 to 100 or more. Although you probably might not want to go over 50, but at least 1 to 50. And then you want to have your workflow well-defined, your process well-defined. I recommend mapping it out, doing a Visio. It really helps you to map out what that's going to look like as far as which purchase requests get approved where, how many levels are there, are the levels hard-coded, are they dynamic? These are all questions you have to ask yourself, for your specific organization. What's that look like for those approval processes and approval levels? And then if you want to build out dashboarding, you can do that with our web parts. So you can, the list, the link tiles, the reports, the list views, all that can give you a nice full-fledged, full-featured system. You can build this yourself with NITRO Studio, and hopefully some of the tips and tricks that I've showed you today, some of the ideas I've showed you today can help you get from point A to point B. Of course, you can always just buy our purchase request solution if you want to do that. Make it easy on yourselves, or you can build it yourself. But just want to give you a sense of what's possible there with the NITRO toolset and with the building out of an application with NITRO, building out the purchase request solution with NITRO. It looks like we're good on questions. So if anyone has any questions or anything you want to see in more detail, I encourage you to go ahead and put that into the questions box now so we can get addressed. If you don't get a chance to do it on this workshop, you can go ahead and send us an email afterwards, and we'll be happy to get it answered. But certainly, if there's anything else you want to take a look at, we can do that. Great, we got a question about how much. I love that. We'll get back to you on that question on the pricing. I think it is on our website. Let me just pull up our website real quick because I do believe it's on there. I made these bigger. Oh wait, no, I think I made these bigger. There it is. Okay. Recently revamped our website, so things are a little different. Let me see here. Teams applications. So it's going to be in this bucket over here about, looks like, was that 300? So about 3588, I think 3588 a year. So that's the base price. Of course, there's training you might want to add on, and there's other professional services you might want to add on. Also, depending on the complexity of the workflow or the approval process, there might be some adjustments we need to make that would add on to it a little bit. But that's your kind of starting point for this application. You can see it's unlimited users, forms, and workflows. We do support it and roll out upgrades. It's in one SharePoint site. NITRO Studio is included. All the things I showed you today would be there. And then you can always add on the NITRO bot for Teams if you want to include that for notifications or even for intake purposes. You could do I didn't get into all that, but you could actually intake a purchase request form, at least a very simple one through Teams. All right, we've got another question. Can this also be used for inventory tracking after the purchase? Yes, Yes, thank you for asking that. Yes, that is absolutely right. On our purchase orders, I believe we have this in our demo, so I apologize if we don't, but I believe we have it in here. On the open order, let me see if it's going to be on open orders. It might be on reconciled, but let me just look at one of these. I know we do have this. Yeah, create assets link here. So again, through custom actions, you can come in and create assets in a list. This is looking at a SharePoint list. And I'll take a look at this custom actions specifically. Looks like there's some error there. Oh yeah, here's some asset info. So point to some assets list somewhere, probably in our demo site, and creating the asset items over there. So we can give it some, basic information. What's going to do is apply that same information to all the items that were purchased. So let me see if, well, we only have one line item here, so that makes it easy, right? So you create those assets. And that can write to a SharePoint list, and you can have as much or as little information for the user to fill out as you need to. We can pass a lot of this information over and just send it through. So yes, you can create assets, you can create inventory. If you had if you're not using our assets tool, if you had an inventory list that you wanted to track off of, you could do that as well through here. So, our custom actions and workflows make a lot of things very, very simple, very easy to, well, if not simple or easy, at least possible. So I'll say that. But most things will be simple or easy. I'll tell you, if we're simply adding an item to a list, that's one of the easier things to do. So yes, we have that. All right, next question. Can you update or add a lookup field value via a workflow? Yes, I believe you could. I want to get into your specific scenario because there's a couple ways that you can add a lookup field value. You can do it on the fly. One thing we have in our NITRO tool set is this concept here of being able to add lookup items. So department is a lookup to another list, department's list. And you can, for some reason it's disabled. I'm not sure why that's the case. But there is an enable new entry option. It should be there for, I'm not sure why it's disabled for this particular field. But if you wanted to enable it, you could. Let me see if I can find a field where it is enabled so I can, it may not be enabled here either. Let me check. Just going to show you the UI of what that looks like. When you're doing it. So okay, so it's enabled. So I enable it here. Normally wouldn't do it for purchase order, but just to show you the UI of what that looks like. You got a plus button here. So that plus button will open up a space for you to add a new purchase order. Whatever that lookup field is. So you can do it that way, or you could or you could also do it through workflow. So if you need to do it through workflow, that's certainly possible. I mean, it's very simple to have a create item action in here, and then you just have to point it to this correct place to create it. So let's say you wanted to add a new department, we could go add a new department, but we'd have to understand like what department's being added, why is it being added. It probably would be more appropriate through custom actions as well, since you want to give the user a space to input that value. But yeah, I think or if you're taking it as a placeholder from the form you're currently on, you could use the workflow. So I would say those are the two options for adding it to well, really three options for adding it to a lookup value. You do it directly from the form using that plus button I just showed you. You could do it through custom actions and pop open a screen for the user to fill out what the field should be, what the name of the lookup value should be. Or you could use workflow, and if you have some kind of placeholder value to add that item to a list, you could use that. So a few different options there. All right. So hopefully that answers your question. If you have more details or anything else you want to add, interest in time, maybe we can take it offline, but you can certainly always send it over to us. All right, great. So great, Krista, thank you for answering the question about how to get on the email. If you're not on these email notifications, Krista will get you signed up for those so you can make sure you get these notifications in the future.
And if anyone listening to the recording or anyone else wants to get added, just shoot me an email at hello@crowcanyon.com and I'll get you added.
Right, and then we have another just a point of advice. I like this. Thank you, Joshua. If you're using our asset tool, and kind of going back to that question about adding inventory, if you're using our asset tool, you can have this integration where you can use that as your purchase items list rather than a separate catalog. So your assets are tracking, your assets list is basically your catalog of items that can be ordered. So that's an integration we could certainly look at if you're looking at using our purchaser tool with a asset tool. We can look at that kind of integration for you, and that kind of speaks to these are all built to be standalone items because a lot of people do buy into assets by itself or purchase by itself, but at the same time, a lot of people buy multiple applications. So we do have a lot of ways to do those integrations, both internally to other Crowcanyon solutions, but also externally to other solutions, other tool sets. Just kind of talking about assets real quick, a lot of our customers have some kind of connection over to a network sweeping device or some kind of place where they're tracking assets already that we can bring them into SharePoint and have a live ongoing connection, either a daily update or a periodic update, whatever it might be. So a lot of those things are very possible. But great. All right. Excellent. If there's any other questions, go ahead and pop them in, but I think we're pretty close to the top of the hour, and hopefully everyone got some good insight and good advice. If you have any follow-up questions, certainly let us know. As Krista was saying, you can sign up for the newsletter. You can always send us a note at hello@crowcanyon.com. Pretty easy, hello@crowcanyon.com. And we'll be happy to have a conversation, set up a demo, whatever you need. So again, thank you everyone for joining today. Appreciate it, and have a wonderful rest of your day.